200 volunteers working on FryFest today. Everything from parking cars to selling beer to standing in line and pushing you around and where to go, where not to go. And so it's a great time. FryFest is the place to be. Hi, Kenny. FryFest is the place to be. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to wander around the building here and see all these vendors. They all brought some very nice and unique properties and gifts down here. And we'd like to have you stop in and see their wares and their apparels and make sure you maybe buy something and freshen up your wardrobe for the big game tomorrow. Darn right. That's the way to do that. So we had a wonderful Hall of Fame presentation here this morning, and then they all signed autographs. They're at the luncheon right now, which should be breaking up. So in about 3 or 4 minutes, we're going to have all kinds of good old Hawkeyes up here. We're going to remember Hayden Fry. We've got a little video to play for you, and then we're going to get going. So grab a seat, have at it. It's another afternoon of FryFest. Thank you for coming. Well, the time is upon us. We're going to remember Hayden Fry. I think of a Hayden Fry every day of my life. This is great to be a Hawkeye. That's where we're at FryFest, and we've got some real big-time Hawkeyes up there for you. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Mitch Fick from KGAN Television.
We'll save the applause for these 6 gentlemen here. Thanks so much. Welcome to FryFest. 15 years of this. How cool is it? I'm sure a lot of you, show hands just here. How many have been here every FryFest? Yeah. Just one of those things, right? Great way to kick off the football season. Certainly a great way to honor a man who changed the game on and off the field. And what a great lineup we've got here to introduce you to real quick. We'll just go down the line real quick and start all the way down there with a guy who really is connected to Coach Fry the longest. Don Patterson was with him for a year in Denton, Texas. At North Texas, you're a Texas native, and he somehow convinced you to come up where they got winter here in the winter of '78, right there in December. A fantastic coach in his own right, 2 Gateway titles at Western Illinois, and again, has known Hayden knew him for as long as anybody here on the docket. Phil Hattie, a guy I've worked with a little bit, just being a member of the media, and if any media members have probably seen him on some camera shots here and there. A College Sports Communicators Hall of Fame member just in the last few years. A Cedar Rapidian like myself, a Wash High School grad. Was with the athletic department for a long time, 1971 to 2012, in a number of different positions. Took over for George Wine as SID, and certainly fantastic to have Phil up here. He's got stories as well. Dan McCarney, Iowa City's own. A City High grad, a Little Hawk. We got any Little Hawks here? A captain in '74, one of Hayden's first assistants, was there for a decade, and then Barry got a job in Madison, and he needed a DC, so Dan goes up there, and then, of course, moved to Ames and had a heck of a run there in Ames, leading the Cyclones to some unprecedented heights that they hadn't been to, and then, because life's a little like poetry, he goes to Denton himself and has a stint there in North Texas. Great to have Coach McCarney back home. We got Jared DeVries. Talk about a guy who's played for some legends, Appleton Parkersburg, and everything he did up there for Coach Ed Thomas. 3-time All-Big Ten performer, was a senior for Coach Fry's final season, and some great stories about the end of the road I'm sure he's going to have for us there. Hep Peterson, before Pat Anger came in and got everybody talking about Bettendorf, don't forget about Hep Peterson, folks, a heck of a player for the Bulldogs. I believe I read first Bettendorf Bulldog to be voted in the Iowa High School Hall of Fame as a football player, something like that. You can brag a little bit. Putting Bettendorf on the map there. 81 to 85, co-captain in 85, first team All-Big Ten, part of some of the greatest teams in the history of this program. That's certainly saying something. Last but certainly not least, Jim Malini, who was kind of the bridge in there from 76 to 79, saw Coach Fry come in after playing for Coach Cummings, a Nebraska native who made the right decision to head east. We appreciate that, certainly, Jim. And I've got a question for you later as we get deeper in the panel about an I-Club meeting in Tama County. I read a story about you and Hayden, and I think that might already be bringing up some memories. But speaking of memories, having worked for KGAN, we've been doing this thing since 1953. We've got a deep archive system, so I want to direct everybody's attention up here to the video board. We're going to take a trip back to 1978, that December of 1978. We found our report from the initial press conference of Hayden Fry being introduced in Iowa City, and super fun to hear how it was portrayed, how it was written. So take a listen to those words, and let's take it back to the past from almost 46 years ago.
Hayden Fry has made a career of turning losers into winners. He did it at SMU, then again the last 6 years at North Texas State. But even with 10-1 and 9-2 records the last 2 seasons at North Texas, there were no bowl invitations. So Fry has come to Iowa, where right now there are real doubts that there ever can be a winner. But there's also hope that Fry can work his magic for the Hawkeyes.
I have done my homework to find out if Iowa is going to be committed to do whatever is necessary within the rules and regulations to be comparable with the winners in the Big Ten. I have been assured that this will take place. Therefore, I am exceptionally happy to accept the job as head football coach here.
Fry talks as though he's about to waken a sleeping giant. If somehow he can return Iowa to the glory days of Big Ten championships, then bowl games and national acclaim can no longer elude him. For that, he's willing to work very hard.
the University of Iowa, and I'm sure the President did a far better job than I in elaborating on this, but we are prepared to compete with the people that have been winning in the Big Ten. And whatever it takes, we're going to do it as long as it's ethical and within the rules.
Fry may have what it takes to make Iowa a winner for the first time in 2 decades, or he may not. What it took to get him here was $45,000 a year and the challenge to put the Hawkeyes back on top.
Probably the best 45 grand University of Iowa ever spent, right? I get chills when I hear that reporter say Fry speaks as if he's about to waken a sleeping giant, because it didn't take long, right? Well, Jim, you were here in '78 and part of that first class with him. What were your first thoughts when Coach Fry took the podium and spoke like that and had a whole new direction for a program that you crossed enemy lines, so to speak, to come from Nebraska to Iowa to play for?
Well, when Coach Fry came in, he had a very sense of what he wanted to get done. I mean, he had it laid out exactly how we were supposed to act, how we're supposed to dress, what we were doing on the field, what we're doing off the field, and very impressive. And the coaches he had that he brought with him, plus the ones he hired when he was here with Barry Alvarez, Dan McCarney, unbelievable coaches.
We'll just go down the line, Hep, if you want to go. Just first impressions of Hayden whenever you first met him.
I would say that Coach Fry was probably the consummate professional. I mean, he was always positive around his players, always coaching, everything like that. But I know that these guys, Coach Patterson, Coach McCarney, he really held those guys accountable for, our play. And so thanks, guys, for taking the heat for us. But he was an amazing motivator, a great visionary. A lot of the motivational things that he talked about and what he did as a coach, we all thought that it's like, what is he even talking about? Visualizing and all this kind of stuff. It didn't really dawn us until we got a little bit older. We really started to appreciate and buy into what he was doing. So,
Jared?
Well, I had the honor to catch Coach Fry on the tail end of his career, and I hope I'm not the one that caused him into retirement. But Coach Fry was unbelievable, from his pregame speeches to the hokey pokey, sense of humor out of this room. So it's just a pleasure to play for him, watch him interact with his assistant coaches, which later in his career, he was letting his assistant coaches do a lot of the coaching, but you could see him either in the crow's nest or just in meetings, just orchestrating everything.
Great to see everybody. How about them Hawks? This is amazing. Really appreciate everybody that's put this on and continued this tradition. A couple of things, and then I'll share a couple of memories. First of all, maybe we can get some of the people on the outside just to quiet down a little bit, just for all of us that are speaking, and for all of you that are here. We just want to respect you and let you listen to what we're talking about. It's an amazing, you stop and think about it, we're sitting there watching it on the video, 1979, and here it is 2024, in this amazing tradition and this show of respect for what Hayden Fry meant to the University of Iowa, to Iowa City, to the state of Iowa, and to all of college football. To have all of you here and to keep paying your respects and loving what he did for us. And you drive through town, as we all do. It's always fun to come back. I spent 36 years in this town. I'll always be proud of my roots. And you see all those Hayden Fry flags hanging all over the town, the Hawk statues. I'm telling you, nobody in America kicks off college football like we do in Iowa City, like you guys do. Nobody. It's amazing. Phil and I were just talking. He said that press conference was in the old Letter Winners Club in the old field house when they introduced Coach Fry. I'm sitting on Morningside Drive with my mom and dad listening to it on the radio. Figured I had no chance to stay with Hayden. I was a part-timer with Bob Cummings, played for him. And all of a sudden I went in for an interview. He wanted to talk to all the coaches that were here before. Amazingly, after about a half an hour, he said, "Well, Dan, what do you think about being my tight end coach for $18,000? And I about jumped off the seat. He was doing all the interviews in Bump Elliott's office. I had no idea. I had the least amount of experience. The youngest but he took a chance on me. And then later that spring, and I'll pass this on to Phil, but later that spring, Bob Lee, as Donnie Patterson remembers, came with Hayden from North Texas. He had the defensive line. He got lonely for Texas, decided to go back. I had Jimmy Swift at tight end. Because of the job he did in spring ball, Hayden decided to give me all the defensive line. And he came in and one day and he opened the door and shut the door after Bob Lee had left, and he said, Dan, what do you think about being my defensive line coach? And he said, I'll never forget this, and you defensive linemen can really appreciate this. He said, it's not that complex. Either tell them to go straight ahead, right, or left. It's not that complex. He said, and then when it's a passing down, you get your butt up in the air, you see red and you smell horse shit, and you go hit the quarterback. Like it was yesterday. I said, gotcha, coach. I'll take that job as a defensive line coach. And the rest is history, as they say. Great to be back. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Well, my first impressions of Hayden, there was two people beside my parents that I've known that commanded immediate respect just by walking into the room. One was Forrest Evashevsky, and the one thing I'll say about Evie was I didn't have to work for him, so that, from what I'm told, that was the good thing. I just knew him as a friend, and he walked in, and that's the way it was. The first time Hayden Fry walked into the office of Bump Elliott, he had on a winter coat, which he very seldom wore in his life, he said. He had to borrow it from somebody. Him walking into the room, he also commanded respect without saying a word. So Forrest Evashevsky and Hayden Fry, those are my first impressions of Hayden Fry. He commanded immediate respect, and I assume that's the way it was with his players when he came in. He was someone special, and you knew right away Hawkeye football was headed in an upward direction, and didn't take long. Took a couple of years, but we went into land that we, for the most part, people are my age and most people out here had never seen before as far as Hawkeye football, and all we can say is thank God for Hayden Fry.
I'm going to take you back to the fall of '78, my one and only year at North Texas. We lost 2 games that year. We lost a 3-point game at the University of Texas. They're pretty good, as you know. And we played both Mississippi State, Oklahoma State. We beat one, we lost to the other. I can't remember which one. But we had 2 losses on the season, and yet we could not get to a bowl game, simply because we couldn't sell enough tickets. That's when Hayden said, we have to go somewhere else. There were 3 options. One obviously was Iowa. The other 2 were University of Mississippi, which had a good program, and also Oklahoma State. I do remember as we went around the table, Bill Boisier had this to say. Some of you know Bill. He said, well, all I know is this. You win at Iowa, you only go to the best damn bowl game there is. I'm voting for Iowa. And I think that swung the vote quite a bit.
Hayden changed a lot off the field as well, of course. America needs farmers. That was his idea. I believe, Hep, you were a senior that year in '85 when that was introduced. I'll ask you about that in a bit. But the hat itself is iconic, and the Tiger Hawk certainly iconic. I talked to some of you before we got up here. What were your memories of those of you that were within the program or around the program, the logo change, and what a stark turn that was, and what it's meant to now be, again, one of the most iconic logos in all of sports. I remember Wright Thompson wrote a great story about Coach Gable a few years back and talked about a guy who traveled overseas and saw a Tiger Hawk and said the only English word he knew as he pointed that and said Gable. And now that's happening with Caitlin Clark. That's happened a few times as well. But what do you guys remember about the introduction to the Tiger Hawk? And you couldn't have imagined it get the legs that it did and become as iconic as it did. It was probably just a big change you're looking at. What's going on here? It's a different thing, but what are your guys' memories of those initial discussions? And even if you weren't with the program yet, just seeing it for the first time, that's a big change.
Well, I was here and we had the old Iowa script, Iowa helmets. And when Hayden came into a team meeting, he goes to us, he says, we're changing everything about us. We've become winners, so we're going to look like winners. And one of the things he said was we're going to style our uniforms after the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were Super Bowl champs at the time, with the black helmets. And then he came up with the Tiger Hawk, and we're just saying, you know, very iconic as far as players are going. This is great. This will be our emblem for us. And that's the way it all started with us. He says, we want to be winners. We're going to look like winners.
Yeah, it was definitely a feeling of a new regime. Things were definitely, you know, I wasn't here. I wasn't here when Mo was here in the transition or anything, but I grew up around it. Used to come to Iowa games. My dad would always say, "Hey, let's go to a Hawk game. We'll see some good football." And I'm like, "Which team we watching?" He's, "Oh yeah, Michigan's in town this week," you know, or something like that. But it was definitely a new era. And for a player, it was cool. It was very iconic, and it really set us apart in terms of, you know, things are going to be different.
Well, the Tiger Hawk was obviously established when I was playing here, but as a player, I don't think you could be more proud of playing for a university, that Tiger Hawk, and the man that made it, and Coach Fry.
Brings up a lot of great memories. We were just talking, I was talking to Dave Brown and Jimmy and Hap and Jared, and we were outside. Some of the best that ever pulled on a uniform here at the University of Iowa was Hawkeyes in the defensive line. Anyway, the first staff meeting, I'll never forget it. Coach Fry came in, he set down a T-shirt, he set down a hat, he set down a deck of cards, he set down a sweatshirt, and he had the new Tiger Hawk on it. And we're looking at it going, what the hell is this? And what is this in a staff meeting? And he set it down the end of the table, and he said, this is the new logo, this is the new look, this is the future of the Iowa Hawkeyes. We're going to make people around the country recognize and respect this logo. And in your spare time, if you can sell some of these things on your own, you can make some money. True story. Donnie, remember, and we're sitting there, we're thinking, well, listen, we're already working 17-hour days. How the hell are we going to sell any of this stuff? We got no time for that. But the rest is history, as we say, when you put it on and you see it around the country and you see it anywhere and everywhere. It's one of the most recognizable logos, as Mitch said, around the country. And then I'll mention another one. This is another quick story, but it's a true story. Donnie, remember, I was recruiting Reggie Roby out of Waterloo East High School. And early offers really weren't made. There weren't that many early offers back then, and when Reggie was coming out. But I'd heard a lot of great things about him. Hayden sent me to his first game. It was Waterloo East at Marshalltown High School. The opening kickoff of the game. Oh yeah, Bobcats, Marshalltown Bobcats. There you go. It's in Marshalltown. On the opening kickoff of the high school season, Reggie kicked off, and he hit the uprights on the field on the kickoff. And I'm going, I think this guy's pretty special. Long story short, we ended up evaluating and recruiting him. Knew he was going to be really important. Little did we know that he would be one of the most important guys to ever help us turn around this program after 20 years of losing. And it comes down to Iowa and Wisconsin. He had a number of offers, came down to those two schools. I'm at the Ramada Inn with Hayden Fry the night before signing in Waterloo, Iowa. He's either going to come to Iowa or go to Wisconsin, one of those two. There's no cell phones. He's going to call me at the front desk of the Ramada Inn at midnight the night before signing and tell me he's either coming to Iowa or he's going to Wisconsin. Hayden and I are having a cold beer, having a sandwich in the bar in there, and sitting there on pins and needles. And I'm thinking to myself, even though I didn't say it, I'm either going to get a raise or I'm going to get my ass fired over this one now. We get Reggie, I'm going to get a raise. I lose this guy, I may be in trouble. I might be looking for a job. At midnight, I get a call to the front desk. I go up there. The lady says, it's for Dan McCarney. I came out there and took the call, and I go, hello. Reggie goes, Coach Mack. I said, yeah. He says, I got some bad news for you. And he waited. He says, I'm going to be a Hawkeye. So I'm going crazy. I run into the bar in a restaurant. I scream and yell at him. He's a Hawkeye, Coach. He's a Hawkeye. He's got some Tiger Hawk boots that somebody had just given him that week. And he's standing up dancing in circles with those Tiger Hawk boots on. I'll never forget it. One of the great memories I have with that Tiger Hawk when we end up getting Reggie. But anyway, it's great to see it all around. Everywhere you go in the state of Iowa, and especially in Iowa City, seeing that Tiger Hawk.
That kind of tells you right there where we were at that space in time when we got that excited about getting a kicker. But I remember Hayden said we have to change the culture, not just the win-loss. We've got to change the culture of Iowa football, and part of that was changing everything. The uniforms, putting the Tiger Hawk in there, and there's a little something odd about that. Now, some of you wearing your Tiger Hawks today, I don't know if you guys remember this. You turn it, and the young people won't have any idea what I'm talking about. You turn it sideways, about 45 degrees, and they call the Hawkeyes, because that's what the Tiger Hawk looks like, the Flying Flintstones. If you remember that, Fred Flintstone, turn the Tiger Hawk sideways, and it looks a little bit like Fred Flintstone, and they says, well, here it is, more losing. We're the Flying Flintstones here at Iowa. And he knew what he was doing. There was an illustrator from Cedar Rapids that Hayden got together with them, and they designed the Tiger Hawk, and it's something that, as they say, will go down in infamy as far as Iowa history, and it did, in fact, change the entire culture.
Speaking of the Tiger Hawk, I do recall a meeting, probably spring or summer, that very first spring and summer. Believe it or not, there were a lot of options regarding logo. And I just want to reassure you, some of them look more like chicken hawks than Tiger Hawks. Without a doubt, we picked the best one, no doubt about it.
So we get a new logo, a new regime, a new culture, and as we get into the early to mid-'80s, the change starts happening. It starts pretty quick. Happy you were on those teams as well. Some of you were still within the program. Jim, you were still freshly out of it. But what do you remember about the moments, the season, the stretches where you see it's changing, it's happening? Everything he said he was going to do in that presser, the sleeping giants getting woken up. What was that like, whether you're within the program, whatever you were doing in the program, or freshly out of it? What do you remember about seeing that and just the attention that was on Iowa City for this football program that was becoming a giant that was wide awake?
I got one great story with Hayden. When he came in, nobody knew who he was. It was always Hayden who is this guy from Texas? When I first met him, he pulls up in a Mercedes, snakeskin boots, and a Rolex, and I go, this is our coach, okay. But that was the first team meeting, and everything went well from there. And sports information director at the time said, maybe we should go with Hayden to some of the I-Club meetings. So I ended up going to Tame I-Club with Hayden. And everybody knows Tame, yeah, it's a good town. They like to have a good time. So we're sitting there, and they introduce Hayden to walk up to the podium to speak, and I'm following behind him. All of a sudden, out of the crowd comes a biscuit, hits him right in the head. And he goes, Jimmy, we'll fight our way in, we'll fight our way out. So he gets up there, and he gives a speech, and of course, he's got the whole place in the palm of his hand by the time it's all over. And he goes to me afterwards, he says, Jimmy, we got to go find the guy that threw the biscuit. You know, I in practice, a lick with him, didn't know him very well. So I said, you know, whatever the coach needs, if he needs me to beat this guy up, I'll do it. I want to start. So he goes over to the guy, and he meets the guy, and he goes, sir, we love your passion. We just got to redirect it a little bit. And the moral of that story, he ended up becoming friends with the guy, and years later, he ended up going to the guy's funeral. That's how the kind of guy Hayden Fry was.
Well, I can tell you as a freshman coming in 1981, everything was serious. I mean, it was serious. It was intense. It was very serious. Again, Coach was the consummate motivator, got people excited about it, and really drove these guys. You know, he was one of these guys who was a great leader and relied on his coaches. He knew if he hired good coaches, these guys would do the job and all would be well, because he can't do it all, right? So I'll never forget, it was my freshman year. We're in practice, and you know, Kirk Ferentz now is the line coach. His first year was my first year. And Dan and Kirk got together, and we were going to do pass rush drills, but we're going to do things a little different. Hayden always had a philosophy that, you know, ones against twos. He never put the ones against each other. And these guys got together and thought it'd be a great idea to put the ones against the ones. And I'll never forget, I don't think I ever saw a coach run down a field as fast as that, but he came running down, and within, a lot of screaming, a lot of arm waving and stuff like that. I could hear Coach say, Dan, I just hired you as a D-line coach. You're fired. Kirk, you just came on board. You're fired. If you guys don't change this around right now, you guys are both to be out of a job. And so that's how I was like, and I'm an 18-year-old kid. I don't know. I was like, what the hell is going on here? This is unbelievable. And but sure enough, I could just say that there was definitely an attitude change by the time I got there. Things were very serious, very businesslike. When you went to practice, you get your work done, work hard. There was no loafing, anything. And all I know is if we love Coach Mack and everything, and we worked our ass off just to make sure that Coach didn't get fired. So.
Well, it appears, or it sounds like a lot of iClubs have a lot of stories, so I'll tell one myself. It was our senior year. We took a small plane over to Des Moines, just for time's sake. I believe I'm correct in this story. And we're coming back, and there's some weather, and cool Coach Fry, he's sitting back in his airplane, and I'm like, I've got my hands clenched against the seat, and he looks over, he goes, now, Jared, when it's your time, it's your time. I'm like, I don't know, Coach, I don't like this, but he was a cool customer.
That was amazing, the transition, the transformation, and I'll never forget that first game, and many of you probably were there. We played Lee Corso, University of Indiana. Donnie remembers it well. Phil does, obviously. Tremendous game, hell of a game. We're ahead. We lead almost the entire game. Last play of the game, they run an out and up on Mario Pace, our corner from Ohio, and unfortunately Mario covered the out, and he didn't cover the out and up. And they got behind us, scored, won. We didn't know how to win. It was the progression. It was the transformation. It was a transition about learning how to go from losing for 20 years, no bowl games, no winning seasons, and teaching everybody how to win. I'll never forget one of those first staff meetings. Hayden Fry had said to all of us in the staff meeting, Donnie, don't you ever forget where your loyalty lies. I knew he was talking to me and Bernie because Bernie and I were retained. We loved the place. It's our alma mater. We gave everything we had. But we were new to his staff. And he said, don't you ever forget where your loyalties lie. It's where your damn paycheck comes from. And he was letting Bernie and I know, all your loyalty better be with me. Period, end of story. What he established, so when I just thought of this, when these guys are talking and all played for him and have such deep, incredible respect for the head coach all these decades later, he did this, and he didn't come out and say it, but when you look back on it now, he made sure all of us coaches and players alike had a chip on our shoulder. He made sure that we would fight for our brothers, coaches and players alike. We're not going to make any excuses because they wouldn't allow that, unlike what you hear all the time nowadays. Everybody's got an excuse for failure. You're not going to make any excuses, and together let's make history. And that's exactly what we did. And then we went on that 1981 season, and those who were there, and Hap was a freshman, as he mentioned, it was unbelievable for someone that grew up in this town, loved the Hawks, never got to experience a bowl game, never got to experience a winning season, and we're not only going to a bowl game, we're going to the Rose Bowl. And we beat 3 top 10 teams doing it. University of Nebraska, after they beat us by about 50 the year before in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they were still loaded. We beat UCLA top 10. We beat Michigan top 10. It was one of those unbelievable memorable seasons. And then who will ever forget Phil Blacher running up and down the field against Michigan State? Our defense was incredible. The two best defenses I was ever around was the 1981 Iowa defense and the Florida defense when we won the national championship. We beat Bobby Stoops, who was averaging 56 points a game. We held him to 14. Those were the two best. And I was around some of the best ever in the history of college football. Those two were the best. But the formula was good, solid offense. Don't turn it over. Keep them guessing. Scratch where it itches, which Hayden made famous. Play incredible defense. And Reggie Roby, you flip the damn field, and we're going to the Rose Bowl. And that's what we did.
You know, a lot of people don't realize it, but Dan McCarney, you know our big rivalry, Iowa State, hardly ever lost to Iowa State. He got so fired up, I'm talking about Dan, when we played Iowa State. He'd be up and down the halls all week, and I'm sure he remembers saying, okay, guys, it's Cloney week. It's Cloney week. We got to go after him. And that's why we never lost. And that's another reason when he was at another school just west of us, why it was very hard for us to beat him when he was at Iowa State. The one thing I want to say, I want to bring up somebody, and that's Bill Brazier. Bill Brazier, after that first season, said, look at all those people going crazy after we beat Michigan State. So we knew we were going to go to the Rose Bowl, and we're in good shape. Bill Brazier said, Philip, get used to it. We're going to be going to a bowl game every year from now on. And you know what? He was right when he said that, and that's a guy saying that after we hadn't been to one in like 24 years. So the other point I want to make, and I don't know if people fully realize this, that could have been in the mid-'80s, without question, in my opinion, the greatest entire football staff ever assembled in college football. When you consider the number that went on to be head coaches, including Donnie, Dan, you know, you've got Bill Snyder. The ones that stayed did not could have been head coaches. That's like Carl Jackson, Bill Brazier, any of them. It was a staff that was unmatched, and he said he did not want a coach on his staff unless they wanted to become a head coach someday, that they had the feeling they could be a head coach. And that was, in my opinion, the greatest entire football staff in the history of college football.
You know, Hayden earned a reputation for being a great motivator, and that really is true. I listened really well in those early years, and years later, as you know, I went to Western Illinois, and I was able, in our second year we won our first conference title, I was able to call up Coach Fry on Christmas and say, oh, by the way, Coach, I want you to know this. Those stories you told to players at Iowa, I'm telling them at Western Illinois, and they still work.
Timeless stories for sure. It wasn't just the Tiger Hawk that Coach Fry came up with, but of course in '85 we talked about this half, the America Needs Farmers Initiative that still stands 40 years later now. What do you all remember about just him dropping another idea on the table like that? And certainly any of you who were farmers back in '85, you know the hellscape that they were dealing with, and what did it mean to you, Hep, and to everybody who's worn that helmet now to just recognize farmers and know that, you know, we're in the heartland, and whether you're from Nebraska, Iowa, Texas, they got farmers down in Texas too. What did it mean to have that initiative and to strap on a helmet and go out there every single game knowing that you're playing for yourself, you're playing for your teammates, your coaches, but you got a lot of hard-working Iowans back there too that you're representing?
When that came to be, I wasn't on the team, but being from Nebraska, it's another farming community. Iowa, you know, a lot of farmers. In Nebraska, we'd always be out in the field or being on the pheasant hunt or something, and we got to get in at 1 o'clock, turn the game on the radio. You know, America needs their farmers. When they come up with that, they just put it in the forefront. And right now, I have a son-in-law that's a farmer in Nebraska now, so it's a great thing for the whole farming community and the Midwest.
You know, that was a really emotional time for the state of Iowa. You know, farm crisis hit. People were losing their farms. I grew up in the Quad Cities, Bettendorf. My dad worked for International Harvester, the farming community, and many of the farmers, and you know, both in Iowa and Illinois, we knew a lot of them. And I'll never forget, was a senior captain. Coach had come to his staff and, you know, with an idea, and then you know, he had enough respect for his players and team and everything. He came to the coaches and pitched it to us, and of course we got way behind it, and it was exciting. You know, Iowa's a really special place, you know what I mean? And a very special place. And for him to honor the core and the heart of this state like that, it was pretty emotional. I still get emotional about it because it affected my family as well. But it gave us an opportunity to really honor the people in the state and what we're all about. And it was fantastic. Great idea. Again, a great marketeer, a great leader, amazing guy.
And really happy. That's what it's all about. I mean, that's what it's all about. You can see the emotion. You can feel the emotion. As a young man growing up in a farming family, listening to the Hawks on the radio, working the fields with my dad. Hard work is what this state is about. It's what Coach Fry is about. It's what this program's about. And A&F just captures it all.
Yeah, and it just goes back to all the special things that Coach Fry did when he built this program, to make it special, to make it unique, make it different. It's the Tiger Hawk. Whoever saw a football coach in the Midwest wearing white pants on game day, sunglasses on game day, when putting A&F to really to exaggerate and make sure the country knows we're supporting our farmers. That's at the heart of everything we do. There isn't a profession or occupation in the state of Iowa that we have more respect for than farmers. If you didn't live on one or work on one, you haven't really lived. Now, I never lived on one, Jared, but I worked on them 4 summers in a row, baling hay on the old skids. You talk about some work now, and we just had such great, deep respect. You stop and think about the A&F on the helmet. You think about the way that you guys took the field. There was a rhyme and a reason for anything and everything that Hayden did. The swarm. Here it is, 2024. I was talking to Kelly Fry, Hayden's son, earlier today, and just said, it's amazing. This is 45 years later, and the people are just still crazy about Iowa football and Hayden Fry. And remember what he meant to this place. 45 years later, it's amazing. And the FryFest lives on. But it's the way we took the field. It's the swarm. It's representing the heart and the soul and the pride of Iowa people, including the farmers that work so hard. Everything that he did, there was a reason behind it in a rhyme. He never pulled anything out, just threw it out and hope it stuck. He knew what he was doing. He was one of the smartest, most intelligent, one of the great marketers, and one of the great football coaches in the history of the game. And thank God we all got to be a part of it and experience it and remember it all these years later.
Exactly what Dan said. Everything Hayden did, he did for a reason, and the reason was to make his team better. Now, I think they'll all agree with me. We've got to realize we're in Iowa. That's something we're all proud of. But we're not Southern Cal. We're not Michigan. We're not Ohio State. We're not Alabama. It takes something special for us to win 9, 10, 11 games a year against teams just like that. And that's one of the things about A&F. We're Iowans. We're all proud of it. Everybody loves to be a Hawkeye. We filled up our stadium when we were winning 1 and 2 and 3 games a year. That's one of the reasons that Hayden came to Iowa. He showed that to his staff down in North Texas and said, look at those stands. They're full and they've hardly won a game. So look what we could do if we went up there. And he, in fact, did that. Now think about this. We've got A&F. Just about everybody in the country know what that means. America needs farmers. That's a great tradition for Iowa. And that shows you where we're at. What's the other great tradition that everybody knows about now? And that's waving to the children at the hospital. So Iowa, in their football program, it tells you a little bit where we're at as far as being Iowans in the heart.
You know, way back in time when the A&F sticker was designed, I don't think we as coaches had a full appreciation for how much of an impact it might have. I wish I had $1 every time someone came up to me and said, I didn't get to see a lot of games in the past, but I was bringing in the crops and listening on the radio. And I still felt connected to Iowa football, in part because of that sticker on the helmet. America does need farmers.
And certainly thank to all the farmers out here. You've made your trip to Iowa City and Coralville today. You've all been massive successes in your own walks of life after your days in Iowa City. What's the one or two major tenets of what you learned from Coach Fry that's helped build your success professionally and personally as you've moved on from your days in Iowa City, carrying his tutelage along with you?
You know, I came to Iowa City in 1976, and outside of a few years that I tried to play pro football, I've been here the whole time. So I know this town very well. I had a construction company in town, and I try to treat my workers the same way that Hayden treated us, is, you know, be on time, be ready to work, and do it the right way. And it worked for me throughout my whole business life and my friendships. And it's amazing the number of ex-players that are from around the country that still live in the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area, and we all get together. Hap and I and a few others around here have started, it's called the Iowa Football Club, and it's ex-players, ex-coaches, trainers, and the like, and we got over 500 members, and we communicate with each other. We have a tailgate over there where everybody can get together, and it's still a big brotherhood.
Yeah, I've been in business a long time. Good job. Give him a clap. I've been on the commercial side of medicine for like 35 years, and the biggest thing about and I took all the lessons that Hayden taught us from the years I was there and even the years past about being intentional with everything you do. If you hire the right people, good things will happen. Trust the people you hire, trust the people you're around you, surround yourself with good people. It was just and it was always the little things, like Jimmy said, he always had a saying, if you're 15 minutes early, you're late. So I've never been late for anything, So he was just a really good leader. He knew how to run an organization. Winning's a process. It's not an event. And Hayden was always patient enough to let things happen. If you do the right things, you put the work in, you surround yourself with good people, make things happen, it'll come to you. And then to recognize that and then build upon that and not settle for anything. And so we never settled for anything, all the years we were there. And then when you get to a point that, for me, that year in '85 we had was really, really, really special. We had followed the program, followed the formula to such a degree. There's an air of knowing, you know what I mean? No matter what situation we got in, we knew that we would be able to pull that game out, or we knew that we would get that stop. I know as a D lineman, talk about Coach Fry. Hayden liked to spend a lot of time down on the offensive end of the ball, right? And the last thing you wanted anything to ever happen was to have Hayden come marching down on the defensive side of the ball. Right, Coach? That was the worst thing, and it's like you knew you were messing up big time if Coach came on our side of the ball. And so that was one of our little mantras, keep the old man down on that end of the ball, and on that end of the sideline, and not have anything to do with. If we do our jobs, that'll make it happen. So,
we could probably talk to any player and every coach, and they're all going to have a very similar answer, because Coach Fry was the ultimate constant. You talk about hard work. You talk about showing. All those things. The thing that I find it unique, at least in my situation, is all the values and morals that my folks taught, Coach Fry reinforced. And that makes me feel good as a son. I try to parent that same way, that's the unique thing about Coach Fry. He had the values, the morals of a hardworking farming community, and that's what he taught all of us, all these guys as well, and is just a special guy.
Just to take off on Hack's mention about the coach coming down the sidelines, we checked every time. This is a true story now. All those years we were together, we had a guy named Ronnie Stang, our phones guy, on the sideline, and before every game, the defensive coaches made sure, double check, triple check, that Coach Fry was not hooked up to the defensive coaches on game day. He never was. All those years we were here, we always double check and triple check it. So most of the time you're just talking about the game and making adjustments and doing what you need to do to win games. But once in a while something might be said from the box to the sideline to the box, and you didn't necessarily need Coach Fry to hear that. But we had a graduate assistant every game that was in charge of, in the box, besides charting, writing things down, just letting Barry Alvarez and I know when White Pants was coming down the sideline towards the defensive coaches. They always say, Coach, he's on the way. White Pants is coming. Coach is coming. Be ready. Be ready. That's a true story now. We always knew when Coach was coming. We must have screwed up. There's so many amazing things that you learn, and there wasn't a game that I coached in after I left Iowa. I was here for 2 decades as a player and coach, 36 years in Iowa City, but there wasn't a game I ever coached in as an assistant, as a coordinator, as a head coach, that I didn't think at some time during that game or preparation for the game that week, what would Coach Fry do? It's amazing the impact of all these guys, these players are talking about, and Donnie and Phil and all of us that were so impacted and enhanced. Our lives were so enhanced by Coach Fry and what he did. Never, ever, ever did I ever do anything again without referring back and thinking about how would he handle it? How would one of the best that ever coached this game handle it? And you know, we all go through life. We get so busy, and everybody's going 100 miles an hour. And sometimes it's just nice to stop and think about someone that's had such an impact on all of us. And that's why it's so impressive to see this room jam-packed. Kinnick will be packed again tomorrow. We all know we're supporting the Hawkeyes. And by the way, I didn't talk to Kirk, but I did tell him I don't want to know anything about what happened. I don't care about anything that happened. What I'm telling you is there's never been a coach that's had more integrity or character than Kirk Ferentz when you take the field at Iowa, no question. So that might be a little elephant in the room right now. Let's clear that up. There isn't anybody in the world we'd rather have leading the Hawks than Kirk Ferentz. But I'll never forget this. A couple of things that you really take with. There's a study done where thousands of people near death in their latter stages of life were asked, what was the biggest regret that you might have had in life? And the majority of the people said it was not having the courage to do what I wanted to do or what I thought was right. And you stop and think about Hayden Fry, and you talk about having the courage to do what's right and be the guy that could mean so much and impact all of our lives all these years later. It's pretty amazing. And all of us, we all know eventually we're going to die. Let's put that off as long as we can. But not everybody really lives. Hayden Fry really lived. And he changed our lives. He impacted our lives. And he'll continue to impact the University of Iowa, and especially University of Iowa football, long after we're all gone. And that's one of the most amazing things that I've ever been a part of.
I guess one thing I'd like to reinforce, there's been 2 people, in my opinion. I worked in the athletic department for 42 years that I think are pretty darn special, and to me, they were godlike. Hayden Fry and Bump Elliott. I think those 2 people are the reason Iowa athletics are what they are today. Both of them worked together. Bump gave Hayden what he needed. And think about this. This is not the case at any university in the entire country. 45 years, we've had 2 football coaches. 45 years. There's some schools that have had 3 football coaches in 5 years. And I remember this in an interview early on. They asked Coach Campbell at Iowa State, you know, you're going to get a lot of offers for jobs in other places. He said, I want to do what Coach Hayden Fry and Kirk Ferentz did at Iowa. He says, this is a good state, the people are good to you, and the fact that everybody treats you right, I'd like to build at Iowa State what those 2 built at Iowa. And to me, the University of Iowa is what it is today educationally, athletically, in just about every other way because of Bump Elliott and Hayden Fry.
You know, one of the things that made Coach Fry such an amazing coach was his ability to think outside the box. Let me give you an example, a specific example. It's sometime mid-90s maybe. It's a Friday afternoon. We're playing Indiana in Kinnick the next day. He drops by the conference room. I'm scripting for the walkthrough practice that day. He asked me a simple question. He said, "You got any problems?" I said, "No, Coach, we're in good shape. I'm almost done with the scripts." And he said, next question was, "Do you have any regrets?" Meaning regrets about the game plan for Indiana. And I said, "Yeah, I do have one regret, Coach." He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, we have a play that's not in, and it should be in, except it's my fault. I didn't give it the proper time and preparation, so we haven't practiced it." He said, "Well, can you draw it up on the board?" I said, "Sure." I drew it up. He liked it. And he said, "Well, can't we walk through it this afternoon? This is the day before the game." I said, "Yeah, I suppose we can." He said, "Let's walk through it, and if you feel confident that they can execute the play, we may run it anyway." The next day, it went for 55 yards. It was the longest play of the day, and we never practiced at full speed. That's a true story.
Real quick in these final few minutes before we hit 2 o'clock, we'll go down the line. What to you is the quintessential Hayden Fry game? Whether it's one you played in, one you watched, one you remembered, what is the game that your mind immediately goes to when you think of Coach Fry?
Well, this isn't a game, but it was a practice. And this goes back to Reggie Roby. And Reggie is a punter, phenomenal punter. But people don't realize he was a phenomenal athlete, too. And when it came to Iowa, he tried to talk Hayden into to play tight end. So Hayden says, "Come on down. We'll go down. The first team defense is down here. We'll let you play tight end." Well, he came across the middle, and he kind of ran into me. Or no, I think I ran into him, and he came up looking out his ear hole, and Hayden says, "Son, you just go back and practice kicking a little more. We don't need you at tight end."
I mean, yeah.
So I made him an All-American.
Yeah, Jimmy made him an All-American. That's good job. I mean, there's so many stories and examples. I mean, things that pop in my head is, my year '85, number 1 versus number 2 playing Michigan at home. First night game.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I hate the Wolverines. That was a fantastic game. But, Hayden was always the guy, the mind guy, you know what I mean? He, the whole pink locker room thing and how frustrated guys like Bo Schembechler, and he'd try and get in those guys' heads all the time. And I think it was that game, it was a Michigan game, and our punter, it wasn't Reggie at the time, it was afterwards, and our punter was struggling, and Bo made a comment to him about, he'd go up and say, hey, Bo, you got any more gum? And he'd hand him the pack to take, and he thought he'd put the package in his pocket, you know what I mean? He'd steal Bo's gum. And then Bo would make a comment about the fact that our punter isn't punting very well. And Hayden would just look at him and says, "Yeah, well, we're not planning on punting very much today anyway." So that's the quintessential Hayden Fry. He jumps in your head and he just rattles around in there, you know what I mean? So whether good, bad, or indifferent, but it was one of those things where you always were very appreciative and proud to have him on your side. So that's what I remember most about Coach Fry.
There's too many games to recite or recall, but I can tell you playing in front of you guys in Kinnick Stadium as a player made our hair stand up on our arms. And even when I go back to watch it, guys talked about the Swarm, the Back in Black. I still get goosebumps, and that's largely because of the fan support and what we represent here at the University of Iowa. I do remember one game, and this will tell you a little bit about Coach Fry, and it was more about football. we were down at the Alamo Bowl, and the Mitchell family had a tragic accident where we lost his mom. And you know, you could take that a few different ways, but he got the team, and he's like, you know what, we're gonna strip it. We're gonna strip our helmets down. We're gonna play for the Mitchell family, and that's when you know it's more about football, and that's what Coach Fry was about.
Great story. It's impossible to pick out a game. It really is. There are just too many memories, too unbelievable. But who will ever forget, I mentioned it earlier, but who will ever forget after 2 decades of losing, Bud Supple and Supple's Flowers, great family friend of ours, he anticipated that Ohio State was going to beat Michigan's ass up in Ann Arbor, and he went ahead and ordered out dozens and dozens and dozens of roses so that if that happened, which was an upset when Art Schleister scored the touchdown and went ahead and Father Bob announced it on the microphone in Kidding Stadium, that all we had to do was finish the deal and win that game, and we're going to Pasadena. And late in the game, I'll never forget looking up. You're trying to still coach a game and finish it out, and here comes all the roses from the press box to the fans. It was something I'll never, ever forget, ever. And when Hap mentioned that number 1 and number 2, we're talking about Iowa City, Iowa. We're not talking about Alabama. We're not talking about at USC. We're not talking about at Penn State. We're not talking about at Texas. We're talking about Iowa City, Iowa, that rose to those heights that the entire country is watching number 1 Iowa against number 2 Michigan. And to win that game the way that we did, it was incredible. Those were 2 phenomenal defenses that day. That was one of the most violent games I ever watched from the sidelines, Donnie, that day, just watching the hits and the collisions. Who will ever forget that? And then one other one I'll mention, because it meant so much to Coach Fry. When we went and played in that Freedom Bowl, Coach was such a great psychologist. He kept the pressure off the players. Even though Donnie knew as much or better than I did, because he came with him from Texas, and Donnie did such a great job of recalling that. He wanted to win so bad. He wanted to beat them so bad. But he kept the pressure off the players. He just let us know, make sure your players are ready to go, or I'll be interviewing somebody for your job on Monday. And Chuck came out and threw 6 touchdown passes. I think we forced 5 turnovers on defense in the driving rain, and that was one of the classic great victories that I was ever a part of, because he beat Texas. And to see him dance in that locker room afterwards, I don't know his feet were ever that high off the ground ever. Those were some great victories for us.
Yeah, it's hard to argue the number 1 versus number 2. In fact, up until the end, Hayden Fry always maintained that big crowd of players on the field. He said I was under it, because a lot of times I was always near there, and I was in the end zone. No, I wasn't under it. I guarantee you that. I was in the end zone to catch Chuck Long when we beat Michigan State on that touchdown right at the end. But one of my favorites, and maybe it wasn't the most important, was that last-minute touchdown pass to Marv Cook at Columbus, Ohio. And it just was a game special, because you don't win very often in Columbus. You don't win very often in Ann Arbor, quite frankly. And Hayden did both of those. He won in both places, and probably more than any of the other coaches around. And it's very special that we had Hayden. You know, he was in the right place at the right time, you know, because I think Iowa's had some. I personally thought Bob Cummings was a pretty darn good coach. I thought his players would have run through a wall for him, but he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Hayden Fry was in the right place at the right time, and we're lucky we got him.
You know, people have asked me a lot through the years, what's the best play calling that Hayden ever did? What one play stands out in your mind? And truthfully, it's not an offensive play. It's a play involving the kicking game, and I'll go back and tell you about it now. We had a lot of trouble with Illinois' defense back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Great defense led by Lou Tepper. And later in life, I coached with Lou Tepper at the University of Buffalo. He was a great coach, no doubt about it. We're getting ready to play Illinois the next fall. We've had trouble with them. So what do you think we're doing in March of the previous spring? We're working on Illinois in March for a game that's going to be in October or maybe November, I can't recall. Anyway, I'll take you back to the game. I believe it's 1990. We're playing at Illinois. It was a showdown for the Big Ten title. And that day we went on the field. And the 3 weeks previous, they had given up 1 touchdown in 42 possessions. They covered 3 games. 1 touchdown in 3 games. That day, we scored 4 touchdowns on the first 4 possessions. Some of you remember that. They had a good offense, too. I think at the time we had 28-14. I think. Don't quote me on the score. I do know we had 28. So now in our 5th possession, we're driving down the field again, and Illinois stops us. And now we got 4th down. And now we send our place kicker on the field for a fake field goal for another touchdown. Matt Whitaker, Jim Harlan to Matt Whitaker. We beat them, but it was a struggle. It was 54-35 or something. So we had to keep scoring. Hayden knew that. 28 is not nearly enough. Let's pass on 3 and go for 6.
We went like 3 minutes long, and I don't think anybody's complaining. Please, one more time, a round of applause for this incredible panel remembering Hayden Fry. For those of you that want to share this conversation, we've actually been live streaming it on the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel, so send that link out. I'm sure plenty of Hawkeye fans would like to hear these stories. There will also be a special Eye on the Hawks podcast, if you're familiar with that. We've been doing that for the last year or so. If you just search letter I, on the Hawks, wherever you listen to your podcast, get your podcast, you'll be able to download that probably by the end of the weekend. Otherwise, head to our YouTube channel and enjoy these conversations. Get out there, keep enjoying FryFest. Get out and enjoy Kinnick tomorrow. It shouldn't be sweltering like it was last year. And keep Hayden Fry's memory alive. Go Hawks.